Hello, and welcome to the latest in our ImpactWayv podcast series, Making an Impact. Today, we are talking about endometriosis. Endometriosis is a very painful disease affecting 1 in 10 women, yet still remains misunderstood, taking years to be diagnosed, and not often discussed. But not today. Today, I am happy to be joined by Tara Joseph. Tara is the co-founder and CFO of Big Plan Holdings. Tara is an extraordinary and amazing entrepreneur, philanthropist, a lovely soul, and a woman affected by this painful condition. Welcome, Tara. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. And Karen, thank you so much for including me. I love this. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. You know, it wasn't until I was doing a podcast about a year ago with a woman I met, Crystal Salisbury, who mentioned endometriosis, and it's one of her missions. And I was so thrilled to find another person affected by this. And then lovely to meet you. But isn't it amazing that 1 in 10 women suffer from this? And it's silent, misunderstood. We feel so alone. I had no idea. And again, even people who have problems, go to doctor, it takes over 10 years at times, if you're lucky, to be diagnosed.
Yeah, it is unbelievable on how many women suffer with this debilitating illness. I don't know which way they call it these days, because I feel like it's an illness. And yet people don't even realize that you could be sitting next to somebody and they have the same thing that you're going through, because nobody talks about it. It's crazy.
It really is. Does it say something about women that you could endure this pain and it isn't spoken about? But you're absolutely right. It's just, you go to a doctor, and if you talk about you're having this type of pain on a monthly basis, because, and it is referred to as a disease, which I have found too, which it very well should be. It's a condition. Yeah. But it's in your head. It's part of your regular menstrual cycle. It's period cramps. Have you ever heard a doctor say, could you rate that pain from 1 to 10?
No, it's so interesting. And for me, just to give you a little background, for me specifically, is I started getting all of the symptoms at 15 years old. So coincidentally, at the times that I was having my symptoms and I was doubled over with pain and my periods were absolutely horrific, and still dealing with that pain to this day. But it also happened to coincide at the exact same time my parents were going through a bad divorce. Now, when I was going to the doctors, everyone kept telling me, oh, this must be from the stress of your parents getting a divorce. And nobody was listening to me. And I said, I'm really not sure that that's impacting in how severe my menstrual cycle is. Like, I couldn't figure out. So everyone kept saying, well, you should go talk to somebody about this. And I kept going to doctors, and then they would say, maybe you need some anti-anxiety medication. I said, well, here's the deal. I did have stuff going on in my personal life, but I am 15 years old and I am missing a lot of high school because my menstrual cycles, my periods were so horrible. I was in fetal positions at certain times of the month where I physically could not move or breathe through them. And yet I was still being diagnosed with only anxiety. And it took a very long time for people to understand when they finally started really looking deeper into this. And I had a laparoscopic procedure because one doctor finally said to me, you know what, let's go check to see what's going on. I was encrusted with endometriosis, my entire inside. So I had gone for a few years, in my young years, by the way, where all I kept getting diagnosed with was anxiety, and nobody was looking at it. And I felt like I was going crazy, honestly, to be totally honest, because I was like, maybe I'm creating this. I don't know. Maybe there really is something that's causing this. And this happens all the time.
It really does. And, if you didn't have problems with anxiety or mental health, this is bringing them on because you're told it is. It is absolutely crazy. And then you're on medication you probably don't need, because most of the time endometriosis is so severe that pain medication isn't going to help, but you're on anxiety medicine and it's not getting to the root.
True.
Actually my case is so much like yours in the fact of when it started being. I remember, isn't it funny? You could go back to those moments. I remember just being in my room alone. Nobody was listening. That was that much pain. And I had a high pain tolerance. My gosh, I didn't realize it at the time. So that, I think that's another thing that makes it harder, but it just doesn't get diagnosed because people aren't listening. And myself, I ended up having masses so large that even my clothes wouldn't fit, and they still wouldn't. They sent me home thinking, well, you have something that looks like about the size of a lemon, because as you had mentioned, it really could only be truly diagnosed during a laparoscopy procedure. But these masses were so big, they were showing up on ultrasound. I was sent home thinking, oh, we think it's being reduced. Ended up being like the size of a large orange or grapefruit. And I was literally going into major abdominal surgery.
Yeah.
And I think I shared with you, I was 1 foot from the operating room where my doctor said, we were talking about you last night. We may have to do a hysterectomy. I wasn't even 21 years old.
Yeah. I know it's so I ended up having, I've had 4 surgeries in my life, 4 laparoscopic surgeries where they ended up having to do full clean outs because I was so covered from like all over. I mean, it was going all the way up. It was traveling. It can travel up. People don't realize. Do you know that your endometriosis can travel all the way up to your lungs? Like it actually can travel all over the place, and people have no understanding that really it's scar tissue that just keeps going and going and going. So I've had 4 procedures done for it, and I ended up I got multiple cysts from it, and then it actually, when people have endometriosis, when women have endometriosis, they find that there is some similarities that happen in other autoimmune illnesses. So mine had come out. I have interstitial cystitis, which completely annihilated my entire bladder and the function of my bladder. And then I ended up I got lupus too. And there is a crossover with these autoimmune illnesses that come out later in life that you're going through it at the time that people just have no understanding. Yeah. But so my first experience with it, like I said, was at 15, and I'm wondering why I'm missing so much school. And people started thinking I was a hypochondriac. And I just remember going, I physically cannot move. Like the pain would be so excruciating, and that I feel like I would start throwing up because the pain would be so bad. And this still happens to this day. I'm still going through it. And I ended up having a procedure where they removed one of my ovaries completely and now I've had children, so it's okay. But because there was so much that was happening that they could not get it to stop. And a lot of times they'll say, well, if you get through a pregnancy, it's going to help you out in the end because it can start alleviating the endometriosis. Well, I had miscarriages and then I had my pregnancies and it still wasn't going away. And you're sitting in the moment, you're sitting in your bedroom when you're dying of pain because the pain is so bad. And I make jokes now and I talked to you about it, actually, that I was sitting when I had my children. I didn't even need the epidural to the very end because the pain was not even comparable to what I was dealing with from the endometriosis itself. And so the nurses kept going, are you sure you don't need an epidural? I go, no, this is fine. And it turns out my pain tolerance had built up so much, which is just such a crazy thing, because of what I was dealing with this endometriosis.
Absolutely. And, I had gone through many major abdominal because you're absolutely right. It spreads throughout the whole pelvic cavity. I didn't even realize, up into your lungs.
Go.
Yeah. It was attaching to my bladder, had been reconstructed. By the time I got pregnant, because you're right, the doctors kept saying that's like, there's no real cure, but if you get pregnant, that's a big help. So they were pushing, which it causes major infertility issues. So, what a vicious circle. By the time I got pregnant, I had 1 fallopian tube and a tiny piece of ovary left. And like you, it still came back. It's just unbelievable. But the pain tolerance, it was funny. I was sitting there going through almost the last stages of labor without any payment. And I'm thinking, wow, could this get any worse? And it's so funny. A midwife was sitting there just thumbing through a magazine as I'm going in labor. And she just looked at me. She goes, oh, by the way, that's as bad as it gets. Go, wow, sister, this is nothing. I mean, I have gone through this for over a decade. And like you, I had back labor. It didn't end. But compared to endometriosis, and that is just insane that it is so prevalent. I actually looked up why isn't there as much research and awareness, because there is no cure. And one of the major reasons is, I looked all this, is because it's a female only condition. So it's less funded and less studied. And it is insane. There's another study that just came out in 2021 that looked into gender disparity in research. And the NIH applies a disproportionate share of its resources to diseases that affect men primarily at the expense of those that primarily affect women.
Yeah.
How insane is that? And what you were just saying about labor, because I've heard, if men want to relate it, that if the pain for a man passing a kidney stone,
yes,
is similar to giving birth. Could you imagine that a woman has to go through this on a monthly basis? Mm-hmm. Imagine the research. Look at the research that goes into erectile dysfunction. I mean,
oh, exactly.
Is that incredible? And it's just absolutely insane that there's not attention when there's millions of women. And I'm grateful for. In fact, we had talked about the Endo Fund. That was, I didn't even realize that at first that it was co-founded by, is it Pashmi Lakshmi, who said, I had fame, I had money, I had medical, and it took 20 years of not getting a diagnosis and living with that kind of pain.
Well, and so, what's interesting to me is when the kids go through health classes, right, in school, they spend very little time on women's health alone, and what women go through. And so, we're the ones that have the children. We're the ones that have the hormonal changes. We're the ones, like, our cycles, we go through menopause, we go through all these things. There is very little time that they do health as an overview, and maybe girls' health or women's health get about a snippet of time. But really, there are so many different things that go on. I mean, there's cervical cancer, ovarian cancers. There's all kinds of things that happen to our bodies that I personally think that we should be separated out of the health, and have our own set of health classes, because people don't know what they don't know, and we're not getting funded for the education on it, and so many women are going through this kind of stuff, and they have no idea what's happening to their body, or they're just say maybe that's how it's supposed to be. That is not how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to have debilitating pain and cramping that you can't get out of bed. You're not supposed to be pouring and having blood that's pouring out of you for your period, which nobody wants to talk about. Right? Nobody wants to talk about that stuff. That's not normal behavior. It just needs to be looked at by doctors differently. And it really needs to be about educating young kids growing up so that they know to watch their body, know what doesn't feel right, and know to advocate for yourself, to go to doctors and be like, this is not okay. Something is wrong. And endometriosis is one of the many things that fall under those categories.
You're absolutely right. After, we spoke, I was thinking about that, and this starts so young. Like, you need to be an advocate. No one would believe it, especially my team here at Impact, that I was so shy. Like, I could not get words out, until after, almost 30. So I was not my own advocate. I was and I was listening to people that weren't listening to me, weren't even asking. And you really, truly have to be. And that is important to teach. Just like anything else, your health, your body, you're right. The things that happen, I mean, there is sometimes a loss of blood. I was so white, that, and so anemic. I was going to surgery, and that was in the 80s. There was all the scare about HIV that they asked you to give your blood before going into surgery in case you needed it. My blood wasn't even acceptable for my own self. A brother-in-law donated blood just in case I needed it. So you're right, that isn't normal. You should ask, do research, and that is an important lesson, not just in any, general health class.
Yes. And, ask questions. And I always tell young women, especially, I actually advise this to everybody, but I tell this to young women, especially. I say to them, here's the thing. If you feel something is not right in your body and you go to a doctor and that doctor is not listening to you, I mean, a doctor can sit there and hear what you have to say, but if they're not truly listening to you, then go find a doctor that is, because it is so important for all these different things. Endometriosis can cause cancer. It can cause endometrial cancer. You don't want that stuff going on for periods of time without anyone trying to look in to see what they can do to help you. So if something does not seem right, you are the only person that will know that. You are the only person that could advocate. Find a doctor that will listen. And I think it's so vital. And I tell that to young girls especially, but I will tell that to everybody out there. And the reason is because it is very easy for women and young girls to go to doctors. And the first thing they say to you is, oh, it might be your hormones. Oh, you might be stressed out. Oh, it might be anxiety. And I will tell you, yeah, I'm going to get anxious and depressed if I don't feel good 90% of the time, and you can't help me figure out what's going on and make me feel that way. I'm going to not feel right. Yes, it is going to impact my mental health, but there is something wrong. I know it is. I shouldn't feel this way. And so I always say, advocate for yourself.
That's exceptional. And you're talking about major periods of time too, because even if you are ill, and I remember being debilitated, a minimum of 3 days. So you're talking 10 to 25% of a month that you're not. But a dear friend of mine, a doctor I was going through, and I was very anxious about what a doctor was telling me, because as you said, it just didn't seem right for me. And he said, we're supposed to use our education and our experience to advise, not dictate. It is your body. And that has served me well, and you are serving everyone you talk to well. It is your body. No one knows it. And you may just have the wrong doctor if you're not getting the right diagnosis, or somebody to actually listen to you, because that is the most critical part of any treatment. It's a relationship with your doctor, and no relationship is going to work if you cannot communicate and be listened to.
Absolutely. Yes. And I will tell you, and I will say this to all women out there, endometriosis is probably one of the most painful things you can go through. It, like you said, it knocks out a good portion of your day-to-day, your life. And when you look at it and you break it down per year, how long you're basically staying in a fetal position because you can't get up because the pain is so excruciating. When you look at that amount of time that goes into what you could be doing, other things other than, the pain that you're in and laying in a bed with a heating pad or taking whatever medicine you need, you have to look at the masses of and how many people are going through this also. And there needs to be more research and more put into this to help women, because there are so many going through it, and so many that are going through it so frequently that actually, when you look at it as a whole, it's a pretty big problem. It's a pretty massive problem.
It's a huge problem. I mean, when you think of 1 in 10 women, I've seen studies, it's checking like over almost 160 million women. It's amazing. And just like you said, it's affecting your life, your quality of life, how at work, with your families, your relationships. It has such effects overall that I am so happy to be spending time with you to increasing awareness. You're one of the few people, could you imagine? I mean, decades ago, I learned I had this and had no idea it was so prevalent. And if anything else we could do is to help people, especially earlier on than it happened for you and I, to not feel alone and isolated, and to actually begin to get some help and healing and their quality of life back, it's all worth it.
Agreed. Well, Karen, you're doing amazing things on a day-to-day basis, regardless. This is one of the many things that you do that's all about helping others. So I commend you for that. I think you're amazing. But the fact that you're bringing awareness and you're bringing education to people and you're allowing women to tell their stories in a world that's still a little bit taboo, where people don't want to talk about their stories, I think this is an incredible opportunity. I'm super thankful that you're allowing me to share my story. I am willing, if anyone ever wants to reach out to me because they say, I'm going through this, this, and this, I would be willing to talk about it. I've got nothing to hide. So I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you. And I thank you for giving people the opportunity to hear what you have to say. And if you can change anybody and help anybody, that's going to be a huge thing to be able to do.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate your kind words with all that you do and the impact you make globally. It means an awful lot. But thank you so much. And to anybody out there, I'm really hope that this has provided some, education, and there are resources available to you. So, Tara Joseph, I thank you so much for spending time with me. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you liked this episode, please give us a like and hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tara.